Unless you've been living under a rock for the last 3 or 4 years, you probably have heard about 4K video. Firstly, what is 4K? Well, 4K, much like 1080 or 720, simply refers to the number of pixels that are within the screen, i.e. how many pixels are making up the video that you are looking at. 4K is so-called 4K because the longest edge of the video frame along the bottom here is made up of about 4,000 pixels. True 4K is actually 4096 by 2160 pixels. However, there is a slightly different variation of 4K that consists of 3840 by 2160, but that's splitting hairs. So 1080 video is 1920 pixels by 1080 pixels, giving us a total of 2 megapixels resolution. 4K video has twice the number of pixels horizontally and twice the number of pixels vertically, so it's essentially 4 times the resolution of 1080. A lot of cameras, a lot of phones and stuff now shoot 4K video, but a lot of people question, is 4K really worth it? Because a vast majority of people don't own 4K TVs or 4K computer monitors. You know, Quad HD mobile phone screens are really good, but when you're dealing with a picture that size, you're not going to notice the difference between 4K and 1080. So 4K is really quite a way off being truly mainstream standard like 1080 is now. But then I remember years ago when 1080 first came about, and that was the same story then. Nowadays 1080 is just the norm. Back then it was completely different. So obviously, looking the same sort of distance into the future, 8K is going to be kind of working its way in when 4K is the mainstream. But is shooting 4K footage now, when most people can't actually use it, really worth it? Well, what are the benefits? First obvious benefit is if you are shooting this video footage to be displayed on a 4K monitor, it's going to look a lot crisper and a lot cleaner than viewing it at 1080 on a 4K monitor, because it has all that extra information there. For example, right now I'm actually shooting at 4K resolution, but when you're watching this video, it won't be available in anything higher than 1080, and there's 2 reasons for that. Firstly, because if I'm shooting at 4K and then outputting it as a 1080 file, that means I have a video area 4 times bigger than what I need. So I can either compress the video in, which is going to increase the detail, or I can crop into the center 1080 and get a closer up shot than what I would have normally been able to. Hiya. So 4K gives you the flexibility of being able to crop in and essentially have almost 2 camera views in one. The other advantage, as I said, is that you can compress a 4K down into a 1080 and get extra detail. So for example, right now I'm shooting with the Sony a7 III. Now for anyone who doesn't know, the 4K video in the a7 III, what the camera actually does is it reads the entire 24 megapixels on the sensor and basically reads a 6K video file. It then compresses that 6K down into 4K. Most cameras, if you're shooting at 1080 or any video resolution that isn't the true resolution of the camera sensor, what it will actually do is just skip pixels here and there, so it only picks up the number of pixels that it wants. For example, common DSLRs with a, say, 24 megapixel sensor. Shooting at 1080, the camera only reads 2 megapixels within that sensor, but it reads kind of random pixels from all over the place. So now I'm going to bring up 2 little video files for you. These were just taken outside in my back garden this afternoon. The left shot in 1080, the right in 4K. Now bearing in mind, this video that you're actually viewing is still only 1080. The right hand side is 4K downsampled to 1080, whereas the left side is native 1080. So you can see there's definitely a difference in the amount of detail that you can pick up. And as I said, the 4K offers the advantage of being able to crop in if you want to, but you can't do that with 1080. So 4K definitely offers you some benefits, but there are some drawbacks as well. Firstly, the file size. Obviously, you're dealing with 4 times the resolution, so there's going to be a lot more information in the file. So for example, those little video clips I just took, both of them were 15 seconds long. But the 4K video file was double the file size of the 1080 because there was all that extra information to be stored in the file. which means if you are shooting 4K video, you obviously need to factor that in when you're buying memory cards. You're going to need extra memory cards to record the same amount of time that you would with 1080. But also you've then got to store that on your computer as well, so all of that takes extra space as well. And then talking of computers, editing a video obviously requires computing power, a lot of processing power. And trying to edit 4K video puts a lot more strain on a computer than recording 1080 does. But editing 4K isn't impossible. My normal workstation PC has a 6-core Intel processor, a 980 NVIDIA graphics card, about 32 gig of RAM. It's got more than enough to be able to record 1080 easily enough. But it starts to bog down a little bit when you're trying to record 4K, particularly if you've got a lot of information. So what I actually find is when I'm editing in Premiere, I'm not editing at full resolution. I drop the resolution down to about a quarter just to make the work process a little bit smoother. If I need to check the detail for something in particular, I can obviously increase the playback resolution for that particular bit. But for times when I'm not at home, I actually edit my videos on an Asus laptop. Now this has only got an i5 processor and a 940 MX graphics, and I think it's got about 16 gig of RAM. So trying to push 4K through this you think would be impossible. It's actually not. It obviously takes a little bit longer, the workflow is a little bit longer to do it all, but it can actually do it. So no, 4K is not a complete waste in the same way that 1080 wasn't a complete waste a decade ago. 4K is going to become the mainstream, just as 8K will become the mainstream probably when I own a bus pass. But for now, you just have to bear in mind that shooting in 4K is going to increase your storage needs. It's also going to push the limits of your equipment that little bit more. And, you know, you're going to have to account for a longer workflow editing. But if all of that is worth it for you, then 4K is worth it. But what do you guys think? Do you shoot in 4K? Do you shoot in 1080? Do you not shoot at all? Leave your comments down below. Let me know what you think. Thank you so much for stopping by, and hopefully I will see you in the next video.